Okay, so I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Picture the absolute ultimate symbol of military dominance.
Right.
You're standing on the flight deck of a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier.
Hmm.
It's huge. 4.5 acres of sovereign American territory, just steel and steam floating out in the Arabian Sea.
It's the gold standard.
Yeah, and the price tag is just, it makes your eyes water. Something like $20 billion for the full strike group.
It's the unit of measurement for global power, really. You park one of those off a coastline, and, the whole diplomatic conversation just changes. It's the big stick in its purest form.
Exactly. It's designed to be intimidating and
Yeah.
screams invincibility. But what if I told you that this $20 billion fortress is actually just a $20 billion sitting duck?
Know that.
What if that very thing that's supposed to project power is actually the Achilles heel of the entire U.S. military strategy?
That is the unsettling and, frankly, pretty terrifying question we are wrestling with today.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're stripping back the layers on a report from HockeyQuat TV, and it all centers on a very specific, very urgent warning from a man named David Pine.
And before anyone just brushes this off, we should probably talk about who he is.
Good point.
He's not some random blogger. I mean, Pine is the former deputy director of the U.S. Task Force on National and Homeland Security. This is a guy whose career has been built on assessing real, tangible risks.
He looks at the chessboard for a living.
He does. So when a guy with that kind of pedigree starts waving a red flag, you don't just glance at it. You stop, you pick it up, and you analyze the fabric.
And this flag is crimson red. The core tension here is this warning to the U.S. administration about a potential war with Iran. But the argument isn't the usual war is bad rhetoric. It's much more technical.
That's the crux of it. The source is basically arguing that the U.S. is drastically, maybe even fatally, underestimating what Iran can actually do. The Pentagon might be operating on a playbook from, 2003.
Thinking about tanks and insurgencies.
Exactly. While the reality has shifted into this sci-fi nightmare of hypersonic missiles, catastrophic cyber warfare, and a nuclear reality that could turn a quick strike into an unwinnable disaster.
It's a heavy lift, telling the world's biggest military that they're the underdog.
It really is.
I think most of us assume, because the U.S. defense budget is so huge, that safety is guaranteed. We have the toys, so we win.
Sure, money buys hardware. But this report argues that money doesn't stop a missile you can't track, and it doesn't stop a line of code that can shut off the water in Chicago. It's about asymmetry.
Okay, let's start with the hardware then. That $20 billion carrier. The source says there are 50 U.S. military bases in the region.
The 50 static targets. Pine's assessment is that every single one is within range of Iranian fire. But you're right, the psychological center of gravity? It's the aircraft carrier. That's the prize.
We're raised on movies where the carrier's the hero.
Yeah.
It's the Death Star, but for the good guys.
Yeah.
How does the source challenge that?
By introducing the physics of the modern battlefield, the report focuses heavily on hypersonic missiles. Now, hypersonic doesn't just mean fast, it's more than that.
It's traveling above Mach 5, right? 5 times the speed of sound.
Right, but speed isn't the real problem. ICBMs are fast too. The real problem is maneuverability.
So, unlike a ballistic missile that goes up and comes down in a predictable arc.
Like a pop fly in baseball.
Yeah, exactly. These things can steer.
They can steer. A ballistic missile is just math. You can calculate where it's going to land. But a hypersonic glide vehicle, it stays low, it changes course, and it moves so fast that a plasma sheath builds up around it.
Wait, pause right there. A plasma sheath.
Yeah, it's moving so fast through the atmosphere, it creates a cloud of superheated particles.
Oh.
And this cloud can actually absorb radar waves.
Making it basically invisible.
Invisible until it's literally right on top of you. The source claims the U.S. simply cannot stop these missiles with its current defenses.
So if one hits, a carrier is a floating city. Can one missile really sink it?
Well, the report gets pretty gritty here. They don't have to snap it in half like the Titanic. They just need to turn it into a firestorm.
Oh, wow.
The kinetic energy alone from an object moving at Mach 5 is devastating. You hit a carrier with that, you're destroying the flight deck, rupturing fuel lines, you're turning the ship into a burning hunk of metal. It's functionally useless.
And that leads to this really interesting cultural concept the source brings up, SOC.
Right, SOC. In this context, it translates to reputation prestige face. The argument is the physical loss of a carrier is a tragedy, sure, lives, money, but the loss of SOC, that's a geopolitical catastrophe.
Because the illusion of invincibility is shattered.
Precisely. For 70 years, the U.S. Navy has been seen as this untouchable force. If the world watches a live feed of an American carrier burning in the Gulf and the U.S. is seen as helpless to stop it, that aura just evaporates instantly.
The giant is proven to bleed.
And the report argues the U.S. can't recover from that.
The source also quotes this specific warning from Iran. If the U.S. strikes, their retaliation will be something no eye has seen before. That sounds almost biblical.
It's meant to. No eye has seen before implies capabilities they've kept in the dark, reserved for a scenario of total war. It suggests we aren't talking about a conventional exchange anymore.
A new tier of warfare.
A tier the West hasn't had to defend against. Yet.
Which brings us to the part of the report that honestly scared me more than the missiles. Because missiles, I can wrap my head around it. But the source pivots to this invisible front, the cyber threat.
This is where that asymmetry of modern war really, really shines. The report argues that while the U.S. is worried about protecting ships in the Gulf, they're neglecting the fact that Iran can reach inside the American homeland.
And they get so specific. They don't just talk about hacking the Pentagon. They talk about water.
The U.S. water infrastructure.
I mean, that is a primal fear. Explain how that even works. How do you hack water?
Well, think about how our utilities work. Water treatment plants, dams, distribution grids, they're all run on what are called SCADA systems.
Okay.
Supervisory control and data acquisition. They're automated computer systems. They open valves, add chemicals, regulate flow. If you can breach those systems, you can do anything. Shut down pumps, alter chemical mixes to dangerous levels, or just stop the flow entirely.
So we're not talking about a military front line. We're talking about my kitchen sink.
Your kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Hospitals. Power plants. Imagine a major U.S. city without water for 3 days. It's not just thirst. Sanitation fails. Cooling systems for data centers fail. Panic sets in almost immediately. It's a societal collapse trigger.
Is this just fear-mongering, though? Is there a proof of concept?
Well, the report points to history to say this isn't just a theory. They reference cyber attacks on Israel's water systems and the disruption of Starlink. The argument is basically, we've done this on a smaller scale. Don't think we can't do it to you.
We also mentioned a total blackout.
This is what challenges the American idea of what war is. We're used to war being over there. We watch it on the news. Maybe gas prices go up a bit.
But life goes on.
Life goes on. The source warns that a cyber attack could cause an immediate shutdown of U.S. internal systems. Banking, logistics, the power grid.
So while the Pentagon is planning a campaign that could take weeks, the lights go out in New York on day one.
That is the terrifying implication. You can't fight a war abroad if your own country is paralyzed. It turns the home front into the front line, instantly.
Okay, so we've got the hardware threat with hypersonics, the software threat with cyber.
Yeah.
But the report adds another layer. It argues Iran isn't fighting alone.
This is the axis of support, the geopolitical nightmare scenario. The report says Iran has these deep systemic ties with Russia, China, and North Korea. It describes them like a specialized team.
Like a heist movie crew, but for World War III.
That's a good way to put it. Each one brings a specific skill to the table.
Okay, so let's break that down. Start with North Korea.
North Korea is the financier and the hacker. The source highlights their ability to steal massive amounts of money from crypto markets. We're talking figures like $1.5 to $2 billion.
That is a huge, off-the-books war chest.
Completely bypass the sanctions. But the exchange goes both ways. The source suggests Iran shares missile tech, maybe even nuclear insights with them. It's a symbiotic relationship.
Okay, then you have China. What's their role?
The source describes China as the infiltrator. Their job is design theft, intelligence. The claim is that China has already been inside U.S. systems, stealing blueprints and schematics.
So you could be fighting an enemy who's using your own tech against you.
Or who knows the exact weaknesses in your radar because they have the manual. And finally, you have Russia.
Especially
electronic warfare. The source points to Ukraine as the proving ground here. We've seen Russian jamming that can disrupt signals for ships and planes as far away as Europe. It's incredibly potent.
So put that all together. North Korean funding, Chinese intel, Russian jamming, with Iran as the tip of the spear.
That's the synthesis. The source's view is that these nations won't just sit on the sidelines. If the U.S. attacks Iran, Russia and China know they're next. So they might provide critical support, forcing the U.S. to fight a forefront war. It just can't win.
The enemy of my enemy on a global scale. Speaking of which, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the nuclear question.
Yeah. David Pine seems pretty convinced the cat is already out of the bag on this one.
What's the specific claim? Because the official line is always that Iran is close to a bomb.
Pine argues that close is a euphemism. The report cites his belief that Iran likely already has the weapons, or at least the capability to assemble them almost immediately. The idea that we can still prevent it might be a few years out of date.
And there's a comparison made to North Korea's strategy back in 2017.
Right, remember that. Tensions were sky high, and then suddenly North Korea conducts that massive test. The ground literally shook. It was their way of saying, the debate is over, we have it, back off.
So the fear is Iran could do the same thing.
A sudden, undeniable demonstration of power to freeze the U.S. in its tracks.
And the cost of miscalculating that. If the U.S. pushes, thinking they're bluffing.
Millions. The source is blunt. A potential death toll of millions. It raises the stakes from military defeat to existential catastrophe.
But let's say, just for the sake of argument, it stays conventional. No nukes. The source argues the U.S. still loses. Why?
The economy. This is where it gets very pragmatic. War runs on money and oil. The source predicts a conflict would send gasoline prices to the sky.
Any conflict in the Strait of Hormuz does that, right? That's just basic economics.
True, but the source connects it to the internal fragility of the U.S. economy, specifically referencing the recent tariff war.
The trade wars from the Trump administration.
Yes. The report is critical here. It argues the U.S. tried to bring India, China, and Europe to their knees with tariffs, and it just failed. The U.S. economy is already bruised from these failed economic livers.
Now we're going into a potential war with a glass jaw.
That's a great way to put it. You have high inflation, strained supply chains, massive debt. Now, triple the price of gas on top of all that. The domestic economy could collapse. The system is too fragile to absorb that shock right now.
It's a picture of a superpower that's overextended militarily and economically. So why? Why walk into this buzzsaw? The source has a theory.
The trap.
And this is where it gets politically complex. The source points a finger directly at Israel.
It does. It makes a very strong assertion that Israel is pushing the U.S. into this conflict because Israel knows it can't defeat Iran on its own.
Using the U.S. as a battering ram.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
The source says Israel wants the U.S. to do the destruction work, to come in, wreck the regime, destroy their capabilities, and take all the hits.
But the report suggests the region is kind of waking up to this.
This was a fascinating point. It talks about countries like Qatar, how Arab nations are now making treaties with Iran or Turkey because they've realized a hard truth. America cannot save us.
There was a specific example about that, wasn't there?
Yes, the source claims there were attacks from Israel toward Qatar to demonstrate U.S. impotence. The message was, see, the U.S. isn't the father who can protect you. But instead of submitting, these nations are pivoting.
They're hedging their bets.
Exactly. They're deciding neutrality or even siding with Iran is safer than being a U.S. proxy.
So normalization with Israel, according to this report, isn't a path to peace, but a ticket to ruin.
That's the warning. You're tying yourself to a ship that's about to sail into a hurricane.
And before we wrap, there was one very specific target mentioned in Israel that Iran is supposedly fixated on, the Nevatim Air Base.
Right, because of what's parked on the tarmac. The F-35s, the crown jewel of Western air power.
And again, the claim is that Iranian missiles can get through.
It comes back to the hypersonic threat. The Iron Dome is brilliant against rockets and mortars, but hypersonics are